put your ego aside for a minute? Something important has happened.
If there's anything more important than my ego on this ship, I want to cut and shut right now. Hey, come on.
We just hit that button, and bam! We're at Magrathea, I think. I mean, I don't know. We did it twice. We're still not there, but anyway. You in?
Escology Podcast interviews our first one with Mr. Randy Kunin. Hi, Randy.
Hi, guys.
And, of course, Ben is on the line, and I'm Cliff. Randy is from the St. Louis area. He's into car audio, home audio. He's been a competitor. He is founder and chief creator of Randall K and does a bunch of other things. So why don't you tell us a little bit, Randy, about kind of how you got into audio and where it went from there?
Man, it started at a very, very, very early age. My family lived in a very small home, probably about 900 square foot. It's one of those houses where you walk in the front door, you're out the back door. But my dad spent the better part of probably 15 to 20 years building a 2-channel room. And I've spent all my adolescent years hanging out with him, listening to vinyl, and helping him build that room. Also, in my early teens, I would travel to a lot of 2-channel shops in the Midwest. Every time that a shop would have something new, set of speakers, amps, whatever, I was always next to my old man doing that. It was really kind of around the cusp of the car audio boom and craze and competition. USAC was in my backyard. Having that availability to car audio and the competition was just amazing, and I was hooked. And so about 16 years old, I started building kind of street pounders for a few years. And then it got to a point where word got around and I was building some really cool cars. I started building some of the demo vehicles for a lot of the regional manufacturers reps in the area. And then it got to the point where I built my dad's the first competition vehicle, I think like in 98 or 99. He had a regular cab Dakota RT, and it was all kicker. It was a kicker Solo Varic 8 up front. It had kick panels. It had a single 4-channel kicker amp. It had an old Orion DQ30. And actually, for what it was an amazing vehicle. It took first in every show, took first in regionals, and it took second at finals its very first year competing. And you got to keep in mind, back then, that was an enormous honor. I mean, not to take away from anything today, but I think there was like 40 people in my dad's class alone. So, I mean, that was a big deal. So that's what kind of really started the beginning part of starting from home and then transitioning to car. And then for me, it was when the internet boom kind of came, and that's when forums started coming around. I was on forums. I was hooked, line and sinker. I got to be lucky enough to work with and for a couple of really high-end car audio manufacturers. I worked for True Technology for a few years. I had my own personal vehicle in CES in 04. I helped with vehicles in 05. I was on Team Zapco for a while, and I competed with my own personal vehicle that I absolutely adored and loved. Its first year, it took third at the kind of like a master's round at Elite Summer Nationals, and we're talking Matt Roberts won first, John Marsh won second, my car third, and then it was Kurt Profit, it was David Hogan, it was Eddie Jesus. I mean, it was a lot of the big dogs, and I was pretty proud of that, considering that my car was kick panels in a single 18. Basically, a week before finals that year, I totaled the damn car. And then kind of from there, just have always been in the background supporting manufacturers, either through training or product development, or, putting my 2 cents in when asked on system design and product design, things of that nature. And that's just kind of been, my passion and what I've done for the past probably 20 years.
So you got some wild designs in your Randall K hi-fi stuff that you've done on your own. What got you going with doing the home audio at that level and getting creative with enclosure design? What made you think of going into some of the crazy stuff that you have?
I really wanted to take all of the awesome things that we've been doing in car audio for years, which is the mixed medium, the organicness, and the things that you love to show off whenever you have an awesome system. You just like, wow, this is amazing, and you go show all your friends. Well, I wanted to create that same kind of experience for home, because in home, if you really think about it, typically in today's day and age, I mean, they're wood coffins. They may be beautifully made, the veneers and the finish may be exceptional, but at the end of the day, they're typically all the same. And I really wanted to create pieces that when somebody bought them, that they displayed them proudly up front and center in a living space. And the first thing they wanted to do was go show their friends. I felt that was the only way that home audio would kind of take a resurgence, because you got to make it cool again. My MO in Randall K was to be able to kind of take all the things that I hold near and dear to my heart in regards to how they should sound, how they should perform, driver selection, driver arrangement, and hide them in ways that are very unique to that industry. Everything from the mediums, the finish, the shapes, the contours. And then I also wanted to create, my end goal was to establish dealerships across the globe. And if you think about it, what better sales tool to have something like that on the sales floor, where inherently people are going to be curious and want to ask more, and basically almost it pre-sells itself. And then the icing on the cake above the looks is, making sure that it performs better than what they look. And that's just with careful driver selection and really taking a no stone unturned approach when it comes to enclosure resonance. And that's essentially what I've built a foundation on for the past couple of years.
You're incorporating signal processing into or at least some of your home audio pieces, aren't you?
Yeah. So this, once again, is kind of a takeaway from being in 12 volt for so long. We grew up in the digital age. We grew up with active systems. We grew up with processing. That was second nature to us in car audio, and it has been a four-letter word or blasphemy in home audio, which is, in my opinion, asinine, because I've experienced it myself, where you have an amazing set of speakers, you have a rig, and the second you put that same rig in another room, it acts completely different. And it's no different than car audio. You have people who have the same driver selection, could have the same amps, everything is the same, but it's the environment that changes. Can take a great sounding system choice and wreck it. And the same thing holds true for home. And when it came to going the active approach, creating passive networks is truly an art form. But at the end of the day, I'm still only tuning that set of speakers to my listening environment and my tastes. Why not give that experience back to the end user and say, you know what,
right,
I'm giving you the best possible platform. You tune this to your environment, which is radically different than mine. You may have a bass note at a certain frequency or a peak. And here's the funny part. So I had my first set of speakers reviewed, and it's probably been 7 years ago. And from a pretty well-known reviewer, was reviewing for years. He asked, like all reviewers, and he actually came to my house to do the review instead of me sending him the equipment. And, the first thing he asked was, what do you have? Can you kind of explain the topology and what you have in the signal path and all that jazz? And I was actually very abrupt and militant with him and saying, don't worry about it. I'll tell you after you listen. And I knew that the second that I would say that there's active processing in the signal path, that he'd say, well, it sounds digital, it sounds processed. After about almost a 4.5, 5 hour session of him just feeding me music one after another, he goes, man, it's amazing. Okay, so you got to tell me the secret. It was obviously a mixture of what I built, which was a design with itself was pretty not only radical but controversial, was a no baffle, no box, freestanding wideband driver called a Lowther, and 2 actually car audio dyno audio 8s, and they were controlled all active processing through a mini DSP. And when I told him that, he goes, "You got to be shitting me! I would have never guessed that there was ever any bit of digital processing within the signal path. It was just so organic and just so there." And so that always, for me, is the telling sign of a great system design, but just sticking and staying true to there's always a positive to digital processing. When in the right hands for home or car, it could be the magic. And that's what, once again, creates the synergy between you and your system in that listening environment.
Who would you say influenced you the most over time?
For home or car?
I would say in general, but I mean, you can pick one for both.
Wow. So for home, definitely my old man. But my old man still, even to this day, probably has one of the top 5 systems I've ever heard in my life. Not being biased, I would be brutally honest, but it was a company called Nelson Reed. It was the ATC mid-dome, which is still to this day one of the best mid-ranges on the planet. It was actually high-key on tweeters. But he taught me how to listen. He taught me what to listen for. I would sit with him, and he would make changes, whether it be to anything in the signal path, whether it be a preamp change, an amp change, wire change, anything. And we would talk through what we heard. And he was completely open to listening to what I had to say. Never said, "No, I'm hearing this, you should be hearing this." It was very much a back and forth dialogue, which is, it taught me so much of really establishing that I can have my own opinion and it's okay. When it came to car audio, man, I guess I've just been so lucky to have so many friends who have been at the kind of the peak of just car audio in general in regards to competition and sound quality. But, when you talk about guys like, Steve Head, Ron Buffington, Mark Eldridge is amazing. Big C's always been a huge, influence with how he builds and what he does. Keith Turner, his truck was amazing, and I would always use his vehicle as kind of a standard and just tonality and just emotion. And even Cliff, I think Cliff and I, in a lot of ways, have a lot of the same tastes in regards to how things should sound. And the great thing is that we don't always agree, but we always compromise and kind of come to something that, in my opinion, is pretty amazing. And so I think if you were to align yourself with one person, you lose, because there's a lot of great cars out there, and there's a lot of great ways of doing things. And I think you got to stay open to that. That is one of the things I did before ever competing, with my own personal cars. I went to car competitions for 10, 12 years between USAC and IASCA, and just sat in cars, listened, and I would catalog what I liked, what I didn't like. If I liked it, why? If I didn't like it, how can I change it? What would I do? And when you keep that kind of open mentality, and you walk into a vehicle and you have no preconceived notions, a lot of times you get amazed. I remember hearing Keith's truck for the first time. I passed by his truck probably 10 or 15 times, never gave it a second thought until I sat in the truck and I was like, holy shit, this is unreal. And that was my aha moment of just keeping that open mind. Same thing with Ruth Roberts' truck. I remember it was the IASCA USAC finals. I think it was the first one that I had in Kansas City. And I remember Jeff Smith came up to me and said, dude, you need to go listen to this truck. And I'm like, who? And he's like, this truck over here. And that was the first time I met Matt Roberts. And, it was before he did any radical changes to his car. It was the stock dash. It was, I still think he had audio control for his processing at the time. But I sat in it and I was just wowed. It was like, man, holy shit. I would have, once again, never would have guessed that. And so, man, I always encourage people just to listen as much as you can. And it doesn't have to be dollar amounts. And I'll go back to home now. I've sat in front of two over $500,000 rigs, and I was not enamored in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, I was highly disappointed. I wanted it to be like amazing. I wanted it to be jaw dropping, and it wasn't. And I've heard systems who, were a few grand that I was like, man, this is amazing. I think you just never judge a book by its cover.
Totally. That really falls into our SQology mantra of, getting everybody together, and yeah, it's competition, but at the same time, we want people to walk around and hop in everybody else's cars and listen to what they're hearing and talk to the owners about it and be an open learning experience for everyone.
Well, and I be honest with you, I think in today's car audio environment, I think it's the ability to get information, and it sucks. It's like with the ease of information today, with the internet and everything, it's so much easier now to get a great foundation and start from there. But there's also so much misinformation, and people who live behind obviously the keyboard and just type away and have very little experience. But I remember back in the day, guys kept their cars so closely guarded because, anything could have swayed, judging at that time when you have 40, 50, 60 cars in a class. And it really took me going to finals for like 5 or 6 years in a row for them to go, this guy is not a chode. And, and sure, I'll let you in my car. And that was, it just took a lot of diligence for that to happen, a lot of persistence. And today, when you go to a show, so many more people are so open to just allowing other people to experience what it is they have. And to me, that is the only way that this sport will continue is to be very inclusionary. To allow people to not only listen, but to ask questions and for us to give honest answers back. And then that way they can go try to do what it is that they want to do and feel really good about it. And then hopefully come with something, presentable. And then that way you just, gained another brother, another member into kind of our cult.
So one of my next questions was going to be, what was your aha moment? But you already covered that. You've mentioned Keith Cerner's and Matt Roberts trucks. If you could blend 3 vehicles together to make the best possible vehicle from what you've heard, what would they be?
In regards to immediacy and that scary holy shit, this speaker's going to hit me in the face any minute, it would have been Eldridge's 4Runner in I want to say it was like 05 or 06. It was in Kentucky.
Can you kind of define what you mean by, the speaker's going to jump out and hit me in the face? Like what are you describing there?
Well, dynamics.
Is it an impact thing? Is it a size of the image it presents, or what is it?
It literally felt like the volume control never stopped. Just when you thought it literally could not punch you any harder, you would turn the volume up a little bit more, and it was effortless. The dynamic range was insane. It never fatigued in any single way. It puts you at the edge of the seat without it ripping your face off, like harsh-wise. Like tonality-wise, it was spot on. And then just in attack and decay was unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life in any car. Mark was notorious for, he loves to fidget. The stars aligned, in my opinion, at that show. And as far as just sheer dynamics, enjoyable dynamics, not loud for the sake of being loud, just loud for it actually being as close to real life as you could possibly get. That was his vehicle. In regard to kind of tonality, man, there's so many cars. I think Steve Head's teal Civic, before he retired it 7 years ago, it had 3-way kick panels. I think it had the JBL 8s, had the Revelator 4s, and I think it had the Hikifon tweeters all in the kick panels. He tore out the crazy dash that he had and went back to almost an OEM look up front. And as far as just a sweetness and a tonality and great placement within the soundstage, or it just wasn't tone, it just wasn't placement. It was kind of all of the above. I would probably say his car for that. And then just for pure emotion, I would have to say Keith Turner's truck, man. That old Nissan, as far as tonality, was just there. There was no effort to it. It just was. It was amazing in regards to how it conveyed emotion. Technically, it was bad. It didn't stage or image or shit, and he'll even tell you that. But as far as emotion, it was amazing. Even if I were to add on another one to make it around as far as like technically, when Big Z's Regal, prior to the JBL swap and prior to the Audio Frog stuff, currently back in the day when it was a Dyne front stage or a Steiner scan, technically it was amazing. You can move your head anywhere, image no matter what volume, didn't collapse, didn't bloom. It was just perfect. And I would probably say technically his car was one of the best I've ever heard in regards to just things being in the right place. And then you talk about that, and then you have cars that defied logic. Kirk Proffitt's TL, before he did any type of major customization to his car, and we're talking speakers in stock locations, door-mounted speakers, which I hate more than life itself, tweeters up in the dash in a factory position. It did things that there was full custom cars that had complete custom dashes and all kinds of crazy things that couldn't touch Kirk's car. It was insane. And the same thing with David Hogan's truck, but Kurt's was an anomaly. It was amazing of what he was able to do given the locations and given the fact that it was really kind of the best practices all the way around. It was awesome.
So what would you say are the biggest contrasts between car and home audio, since you've been more heavily in both for a longer period of time than most anybody that I know anyway?
When it comes to car, you get dynamics, the immediacy of dynamics that you just don't get in home unless you're into an insanely large home system with a lot of drivers. I mean, you got to figure you're pressurizing usually a quarter or a 16th of the space. I mean, it's quite a different environment. The micro detail that you hear in car, you typically don't get unless you have a really badass, not just home system, but a room where your noise floor is down to truly hear those microdynamics. And a lot of times, too, the image focus is better in car than in home, and the ability to get a very precise shape. But then when it comes to home audio, there's a size difference in regards to how it presents the stage and the layering that, in my opinion, still can't be touched in car at all. Cars do okay, but they can't give that size, and not just size and width and depth, but instrument size and vocal size. The system to do it right truly make you feel like that life-size person is performing in front of you. And there's some subtleties when it comes to home in regards to some of the attack and decay are usually not as force sounding in the car, because you're not only dealing with a smaller environment, but you're also dealing with glass and plastics and all of the things that really are a audio nightmare. You don't typically deal with that in home, and so it just seems to be a little bit more effortless in regards to how it presents audio. And so that, to me, those are the trade-offs. It's either you get the intimacy and the immediacy and the micro details that you do in car, or you just get the more emotional life-size presentation in home. And I enjoy both.
What's a street pounder? You said that in your opening statement, and I was going to stop you.
That's funny.
Clarify that.
So, man, back in the day, it was all about the bass, man. And, you have SPL competitions, today, obviously the car audio competition. Every other video you see pop up or something car audio is somebody doing the hair trick. That didn't, that wasn't present back when I was in it. It was typically a lot of my friends would either have 2 or 4 12s or a pair of 15s. I always had 18s. I loved them damn thing, that size of a driver, and I still do today. They were typically high efficiency, low moving mass, just very articulate bass, but it usually was how many blocks can I hear? That was how people judge you. How many blocks can I hear you from? Before you 2 blocks, man, before you even got here, you're like, shit, I gotta step up my game. And it was like 4, man, I heard you for a couple minutes before you even got here. I'm like, sweet. But that's really was the old school. I mean, that was the end thing back then, before computers, really any type of cell phone. We made loud vehicles. That was the end thing at the time, and that's what attracted the dumb ladies that liked that shit too. That was the thing. God, we were stupid.
All right, that's all I had. I think you covered a whole lot of ground in the questions Cliff asked and your responses. I thank you for your time, and I'm sure we're going to have all kinds of more stuff to come back at you with specifically. But great interview, man. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure. It's an honor. Love you guys to death, and man, I hope this turns into more. And it's not just me included, but in regards to just getting other people's perspectives. To get people engaged in this, wanting to listen, and to grow the numbers, and to get fresh faces in those lanes. It's really what it's all about, man.
So, 2 more questions. If you had one song that you could use to evaluate a system with, what would it be?
Oh, for home, it's St. James Infirmary. It's a Louis Armstrong song, and I would have to tell you what LP, what record it's off of, because it's not. He's got a couple versions of that track, but it's the one that it's very haunting. I mean, it is as emotional. Like every time I hear it on a good system, it is the only song that on multiple occasions has given me the goosebumps that are not forced. Just like the holy shit, this is Louis in my room for that. So that's home through and through. I've listened to that song in car, and I just don't think that Cars, once again, going back to the sense of space and depth, it can't do that song justice enough to where you hear that magic. When it comes to car audio, good God, I go through so many different songs over the years. I would say there is a buddy guy. Here's how I've always kind of judged cars. You have the hyper-critical, hyper-detailed music that is so much fun to hear when a system is in that upper echelon. You hear the things that you typically never hear before, and that's really sometimes what separates the men from the boys. But at the end of the day, I feel that the music that you love is the music you should judge with, and within context. If it is recorded like shit, obviously that's dumb, and you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're doing the system that you're judging a disservice. But if it's recorded very well, I feel that, in my opinion, that is the best way to judge a system, because you want to be emotionally involved with the song, as well as you want to hear all the details that you're used to hearing. And so with all that being said, I would say probably Crawling King Snake by Buddy Guy, or Fink has a song called Pretty Little Thing on his live CD, and it's probably one of those 2 songs are my favorite.
Last question. If you could tell somebody one thing from what you've learned over the years, what piece of advice would you give to somebody who's kind of starting their journey in audio where we all did however many years ago?
Sure.
Or in other words, what would you tell yourself at 15?
You can't fix everything with processing. But in the flip side, don't be scared of processing. I feel that you need to use as much processing as you possibly can once you've established a solid foundation. I think so many people today feel that you can just throw a system in and you can fix it on the back end with processing, just because processing is so readily available. I feel that you need to go back to basics. You need to do your diligence with placement. You need to do your due diligence with resonant control, making sure that energy transfer doesn't happen between you and speakers, and then you touch processing. And processing should just fix the things that really cannot be fixed prior to tuning. And to me, I think that's where so many system installs and in car audio have fallen short. And to be honest with you too, that there's just tuning itself as an art form. Myself, I have both ruined a car and made it amazing with tuning. And so it's a very dangerous thing if done incorrectly, but it's such an amazing thing if done correctly. The cars that I've had to do very little to on the processing side are, in my opinion, always the cars that sounded the best.
I agree. All right. I think we'll wrap it up there, and I'm sure we'll have you back at some point soon.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure, gents. Have a great one.
Hello, my name is Jerry Actrix, and I was calling for the Squallergy hotline, and I apologize in advance if this is not the right number, because there's no voicemail answering receipt message telling me who to call, so I was going to leave a message in hopes it gets to the right people and stuff. So I have a suggestion for the Squallergy podcast, and I think that's a good idea maybe to have a feller named Chris Myers maybe on the podcast. Some of the Sound Team 6 fellows that recently went down to Cumming, Georgia, and they did good in their car audio systems and whatnot, and that was nice that these folks, they won, and it'd be nice to hear what they think about their own cars, maybe get them talk a little bit about their install and their tone and how they approach car audio. I've met these fellers, Chris Myers again and Brother Michael, and they're right down good fellers, and I think it'd be a good idea to have them on the show with y'all and whatnot, and that's about it. So again, if it's the right number, you probably done hung up by now, so I don't know why I about apologize. I had no sense in it, so we'll just go ahead and have you a good day and whatnot. Thank you very much. My name again is Jerry Actrix. It's Actrix. Thank you. Bye.